first off, could you just say your name? And,
Curtis Kramer.
all right. And Curtis, where do you currently reside?
On Devonshire Drive in the Moreland neighborhood
In Carlisle.
in Carlisle.
Okay. Now, have you always lived in Carlisle, or?
I grew up here. I was born in the old Carlisle Hospital.
Okay.
And at age 25, I left and I was gone for about 20 years. I lived in various places, Arizona, Massachusetts, and New Mexico. I lived on the Navajo Reservation in Arizona. I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Somerville, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston.
Yeah. And then when did you move back to Carlisle?
2002.
Okay. Now, what? I guess I'll ask. Why did you leave work or?
Yeah, work. I got a job with the Bureau of Indian Affairs at a school on the Navajo Reservation. And I was there for approximately 4 years. I worked as a business manager for the school. So it was work.
Now, how did you find yourself in that role?
Well, it's a different type of life. It's more of a tribal lifestyle, which is very different from what I was brought up in, and I like going back. I like visiting, and it's kind of like home sometimes. It's like going home when you've lived away from it. Other places like Boston, I would never feel like I was going home because it was just crazy living, but it's very rural, very isolated. But I loved it. I fell in love with the place.
Now, I'm wondering, in Carlisle, of course, we have the Indian school. Was there any sort of connection with?
My great-grandfather taught at the school.
Okay.
He taught agriculture.
What was his name?
Henry, was it Garber, I believe. It was
Okay.
Henry Garber is his name. He died, he was kicked in the head by a mule, and he actually died. I think the school closed in 1929.
Well, 1918
19
is when the school closed.
Okay, so he would have died the year before that, I think.
Okay.
I think that I haven't done any research on it, but
Yeah.
so my mother had a lot of tales because my mother grew up. Her mother died when my mother was 8 years old, so she grew up with her grandparents, and Henry was working at the school, and so there were all these stories she had about the school.
Are there any in particular that stand out to you even now? Or?
Yeah, my great-grandmother, Jenny, related a story. One of her daughters eloped, ran off to Maryland to get married, and she was very upset about that. And there were these two Indians from Oklahoma, and they would sneak out and come over to my great-grandmother's house and for food and things like that. And they really loved my great-grandmother, and they saw that she was upset though one day, and they said, "Well, you tell us who these people are, and we'll kill them for you." And because they really liked her that much.
Yeah.
That's one of the stories, and but my mother had some photographs that she donated to the Historical Society. So that's about all the stories I know. My mother used to tell a lot of them, but I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Forgotten a lot. That was one that stood out.
So is that, did that make you want to become involved with the Indian or Bureau of Indian Affairs, or?
Not really. I had a girlfriend who did her student teaching on the Navajo Reservation.
Okay.
And she got a job teaching then after she came back from her student teaching, and I promised I would go out with her, and I had never been out before, and
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time. It was it's just a whole different reality. The physical, natural environment and the human environment. It's just something I never experienced before. And then we left and came back again here. And there was some kind of feeling that was drawing me back out there. I can't explain it, but that's I wanted to return. So it was more her doing than my great grandparents.
Yeah. Were any of the individuals at the reservation? Did you ever tell them stories about Carlisle or your grandmother?
They were not really, but they found out I was from Carlisle. They were familiar with the Indian school, and there was one artist, Teddy Begay, and he goes to an art show in New Jersey, and he always wanted to, on his way back from returning from there, he always wanted to stop in and see us, and we could take him to the graveyard.
Yeah.
And he always wanted to see that. I haven't heard from him, so I don't know what happened to him. But he wasn't at the school. He worked at the hospital my wife worked at.
Okay.
And we became good friends. And he was familiar with the Carlisle Indian School. So
I'm wondering, was there anything that stood out about Carlisle when you were growing up, or?
It's funny. You really don't get to know a place until you move away from it.
Really?
I don't know how to explain that, but
you just kind of take it for granted.
I believe that's it.
Yeah.
I believe that's the reason you're here, your parents are here, your family's here. You just have to deal with the reality of being in a place, and you just accept it, and you're always learning about other places in school, and for some reason it just doesn't count when you're in it. You have to get away from it. It's like your own family. You have to get away from your family to actually get to know them. The daily existential routine of living with your family and your environment just is just that. It's existence, and then when you go away from it, you start to think about it. So that would be my explanation for it.
Where did you grow up? Like which street?
West South Street.
Okay.
The first block of West South Street.
How has that area changed since you came back in 2002?
It hasn't changed that much. There were two houses adjoining our house, and they tore those down back in the 70s. And my father sold the house I grew up in. It was actually my great-grandmother's house, and it was deeded around 1850.
Oh, wow.
And they agreed with her to buy it and house her. She could still live there. And then when I was living there, my father bought the property behind us that ran back to the alleyway, and he built a shop. And when I came back in 2002, he was 80 years old. So he remarried. My mother died in 1998, and he remarried, and he sold the house, and he sold me the shop. So to this day, I have the shop that my father built in like around 1978. So not much has changed. We're right beside the municipal building, and it's pretty much stayed the same. So not a lot of change.
Well, what about the rest of Carlisle? Has that?
Well, the warehouses, of course, it would be the biggest change. The Miracle Mile, the truck stops, but centrally, the town itself, it's changed a little bit, but I can't point out anything really very significant. It seems to have stayed fairly much intact, as I remember it.
Yeah.
I remember, like where the Comfort Suites are now, there was a big hole in the ground there where it used to house Bowman's department store,
Okay.
and that caught on fire
Yeah.
in the early '60s. And I remember I lived about a block and a half away from there. My father went out to volunteer, but the water kept free. It was so cold, the water was freezing. They couldn't put the fire out, and then there was just this big hole left in the ground for seemed like decades. They didn't do anything with it, and they finally developed it. And then there was Woolworths. I remember as a child going to Woolworths. Israel's, the men's store.
Mm-hmm.
Places like that have changed. And most of the stores downtown have changed. Dutry Shoes has changed. So about every store downtown has changed. But the building is still there.
Yeah.
So it's like the vault. That used to be a bank,
Oh.
as I remember. But it really hasn't physically changed that much as I can see.
Yeah. Well, where did you attend school growing up?
I went to Carlisle. I went to Letort Elementary.
Okay.
We were actually in the Moreland School District, but right on the edge, and I was a block and a half from Letort, and I don't know how many blocks away from Moreland, so we got an exception.
Okay.
And went to Letort, and then I went to the old Lamberton, which was on between Moreland and College Street. I went there for 7th and 8th grade, junior high school is what they called it then. And David L. Schwartz, intermediate, 9th and 10th, was fairly new at that time. And then the senior high school, Carlisle Senior High School. Then I went to Shippensburg and got a degree in finance from Shippensburg.
Oh wow.
So that's my educational. And I went to school in Boston for cabinet and furniture, antique reproduction, cabinet, antique reproduction and restoration, and cabinet and furniture making. So that's my educational background.
Do you remember anything standing out during your school years, or?
I remember it was a drastic change from elementary going into junior high. It was you were meeting people from other schools, and that was dramatic. I remember the band under, I believe his name was Clyde Barr. They had a really successful run with the band. They went to Germany. They were like voted the best band in high school band in the U.S.
Yeah.
Something like that. It was school. That's all. I remember mostly I was on the chess team with Mr. Coolidge. He's a good friend of mine. He passed away in, I think, 2000. But when I came back from my mother's death, or eventually her death, and her funeral, he saw that my mother had died, so he wrote me a card. And I got to see him in '98 and went over to his house, and he gave me some old trophies that were just gathering dust in his attic. But he was a really neat man. I really enjoyed Mr. Coolidge.
What was he? What was his role at the?
Well, he was a history teacher at the high school,
Okay.
and he was the coach, the chess team coach for the high school. And at that time, chess was a big deal because of the match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky in Iceland. It was like, Bobby beat the Russians on the chessboard, and it was a fanatical time for chess. And Mr. Coolidge's one son, Phil, he's associated, I think, with the Historical Society.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he was an expert chess player. He was a very good chess. He probably still is. So I shouldn't say it in the past tense.
What about yourself? Do you still play? Or?
Yeah, I'm more involved now than I've ever been. So it's as you get older, you just kind of weed out things that you don't aren't necessary anymore, and you latch on to those things that have gotten you through life, and chess is one of those things. So
Now, where do you play?
on the internet mostly.
Okay.
I do if I'm on the computer and on the internet, it's with chess. I mean, I have email and all that, but that stuff just kind of gets pushed to the side.
Yeah.
So I play people on the internet from all over the world, which is chess is a great geographical lesson. If you want to learn geography, play chess.
Now, what was Mr. Coolidge's name, or first name?
Mr. Warren Coolidge.
Warren Coolidge. Oh, wow.
And I think Phil lives here. He moved back. I forget. He was in Massachusetts, and then he moved back. And Julie, I think his daughter, is in Massachusetts, and his other son is living here too. So.
Now, so you moved back in 2002 to Carlisle.
Yeah.
What was the impetus behind that?
Oh, education. The schools in New Mexico. We lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The schools were nationally ranked like 49th. They were okay in the elementary grades, but once you hit 7th grade, you were throwing your child to the wolves. So we had a daughter. We homeschooled for a year, and then we moved back, and I was very happy that they got educated here, because I felt that my education was very good, and it had stayed intact, the educational system. I realize it's being dismantled now. The whole United States, the education system is just like crumbling, but they all got a good secondary or primary education in Carlisle. So it was the schools.
And then you just decided to stay after that?
Yeah, it's easy to live here.
Yeah.
After living in Somerville and Boston area and Santa Fe, which is maybe about the size of Harrisburg, city life, you pay a premium, and your mental health and your pocketbook, and just for the so-called advantage of living right in a city. I wouldn't recommend it. The hinterland is much better. This is a great location to take advantage of what cities have to offer, major cities like New York. A guy can get on a bus and go to New York and get off at, I guess, Grand Central Station. And why should I drive? I mean, it'd take me just as long to drive and to park and pay gas. And I mean, driving in New York isn't any fun. So, and Washington's 90 minutes away, Baltimore, Philadelphia. So it's on the fringe. But you don't have to pay the premiums of living in the city. So it's cost of living. And then my wife went back to visit Santa Fe 2 years after we had moved back, and she would have gone out 2004. And when she came back, she said, I realized how expensive it was to live there.
Really?
Versus here, the cost of living is very reasonable.
Wow.
So.
To be honest, I woun't think that.
Well, the school taxes are pretty high here. Out there, they're very, very low. But other than that, just the day-to-day cost of living is a lot. And of course, in Somerville and Boston, it was very high too.
Yeah.
I mean, we were paying rents we went there 1984 to 1987. Rents then were about what they are today here, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So it was very expensive.
Well, I guess one other question before I forget to ask is there anything in Carlisle or sort of the greater area near here that you sort of find really valuable that you don't want to lose, that you want to highlight, or?
Well, Gettysburg.
Gettysburg.
Not necessarily the war aspect of it, but it's just I guess it's the speed limit that you can't go over 15. It's so quiet there.
Yeah.
And you take a bicycle over there. And when I was a child, my dad used to go over to the seminary he was a member of the church we used to go to, a member of the board of directors or something. And we'd put our bikes in the trunk, and a couple of my friends, we would go over there and just ride around all day long. And no worry about getting run over by a car, because the cars weren't allowed to go that fast. It's just a neat area.
Yeah.
And that would be one thing. But I don't do a lot of traveling anymore. I've got enough projects at the shop and at home that keep me going.
See, this is the shop that's behind the house that you grew up in.
Yeah, it was on a separate deed from the house. So I was able to buy just the shop property.
Yeah. And what do you do there, if you don't mind?
Right now I'm fixing the roof.
Okay.
But I'm a woodworker, a cabinet maker, and furniture maker by trade. And I have a business background too, so that helps. But right now I'm just concentrating on getting the roof finished so it won't leak. It is 40 years old and it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So, but I have plenty of a big stash of wood that once those maintenance projects get done, then I'll delve into that. So, but I'm not working on anything that I'd like to be working. I'd rather be doing that than doing the roof. But first things first.
Yeah. Do you have a specialty or?
Just antique reproduction and restoration. Just I went to North Bennett Street School in Boston. It was in the north end of Boston, the Italian section. It's a great section to be in. The food at lunch was very reasonable and very good, and you felt like you walked down the street, you felt like you were perhaps in Italy. They had a calamari place that there was a line, really good calamari. I mean, they just had great places. And the school I went to specialized in teaching you how to do mostly making furniture versus restoration. We didn't do much restoration. So in the styles of William and Mary, Queen Anne, Chippendale, Federal furniture, Hepplewhite, things like that. So.
Now, what drew you to that field or trade?
Well, my father was a carpenter, and I was around wood all my life. And carpentry's okay. Carpenters are more efficient woodworkers than cabinet makers.
Yeah.
They have for some reason, they have a built-in efficiency. And cabinet makers are real picky people, and I used to hear the term every once in a while. Oh, he's just a picky cabinet maker, and I wanted to do more, I guess, than what my father did. He was very good.
Yeah.
He got trained as an apprentice under the GI Bill in the 40s and 50s, and so I learned some from. I was always around it, and I was good at it. So I guess I'm really not in love with it, but it's what I do, what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And so that's. I always wanted to be in woodworking. I really didn't want to go to college, but when I was in high school, they said, no, you're going. They had like 81A, 81B, 71A, 71C. I was in the top tier of students, and they said, no, you're going to college, so just forget about being a woodworker.
You've managed to.
Yeah, I managed to go back to do what I really wanted to do, so nanner, nanner, boo-boo.
Yeah, exactly. Well, is there anything else that I should have asked but didn't, or that you want to bring up?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
But, this is just kind of off from the seat of my pants interview, so.
Same here, so.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for
You're
talking
welcome.
with me today. It's a pleasure.